Welcome to Mother Earth News Fair 2011. Today I'm going to be talking about composting, what you need to know. My name is Jason Akers. I'm the host of the Self-Sufficient Gardener podcast. You can find my podcast on iTunes or at www.theselfsufficientgardener.com. So when Mother Earth News Fair asked me to talk about composting, I thought of all things, why are they going to ask me to talk about composting? You know, composting is one of these black arts that it's really difficult to get it exactly right every single time. And what I mean by that is you can do all the ratios perfectly exact, you can do everything completely right, and you can still have trouble with it. But I'm going to show you some of the things I've learned today in a visual format, hopefully, so you can kind of pick it up. I pick things up better visually. And show you what I've done to make composting a little bit easier on me, and hopefully a little bit easier on you also. So the first thing we're talking about is what is compost? I think most of you all are here because you know what compost is, you just want to know how to do it. But I think it's important to learn a little bit first about what it is and some of the little intricacies of it before we really talk about how to do it. It'll help you do it better later. So Cornell defines compost as the biological stabilization and decomposition of organic substrates under conditions which allow for the development of thermophilic temperature resulting from biologically produced heat. Right? So, I define it as it's a mixture of decayed organic matter used to improve soil structure and provide nutrients. That's basically it. You know, there's some other things you're doing while you're composting, but that's the long and short of it. So, the thing you have to understand too is compost occurs naturally and continually in nature without us doing a thing. Everything living, everything organic is potential compost. I can lay down this stage right now, and no one feeds me or gives me water for a few days, I'm going to become compost. I want to tell you all that to begin with, so you understand that it's hard to do it quick, but this happens slowly in nature all the time. You can't stop it from happening. If it didn't happen, everything would die, including us. So again, everything organic wants to become compost again. Compost is nature's method of reincarnation. I touched on it a little bit. It shows the tree. The tree says time's up, drops its leaves. One thing people say a lot, you know, we just hit fall yesterday, first day of fall. People say, well, the trees are losing their leaves. Trees don't lose their leaves. This is just a little sidebar, so bear with me. Trees actually sacrifice their leaves. They cut them off. They have cells in every leaf called abscission cells, and they know when the days start getting shorter and the temperature starts dropping, bam, they start cutting their leaves off. So why do they do this? Well, they do this to make compost because they know that their leaves aren't going to take as much energy during the winter. They're going to freeze, thaw. They'll hit a warm temperature and they'll start growing again, and then, you know, bam, they freeze and they die again. So the trees actually sacrifice their leaves to make compost at their base, at the roots, so they can grow next year. So if trees can do it without any intelligence at all except inherent intelligence, we can do it. People say a lot, well, compost is organic fertilizer. Is it really? No, not exactly. Not exactly. I'm going to explain. With a nitrogen fertilizer, what we commonly call NPK fertilizer, which is just nitrogen, phosphorus, phosphates, and potassium, you only get those three things. You're not getting anything else. The manufacturers put those three chemicals in a stable form, they release quickly, and they get them in there and they're done. They sell it to you. What does fertilizer do? Well, first of all, it salts the soil. Though, in order to make something stable, you have to make it a salt. We hear about, you know, table salt all the time. Table salt is sodium chloride. Sodium is a volatile metal that if you get water on it will literally explode. Chloride comes from chlorine. Chlorine is a volatile gas. They used it as a chemical agent during World War I, I believe. Basically, it gets in your lungs, makes hydrochloric acid, you die. You put those two things together, you get a stable chemical. You get table salt, which we can eat. So from a volatile metal and a volatile gas, you get table salt, which we have to survive. But it's not good for our soil. We don't go out and dump salt in our soil unless we're trying to kill slugs. And even then, it's not going to be good. The plants are going to take up the salt, you're going to have trouble eventually. So it salts the soil, and the soil repels water. It becomes hydrophobic. So in other words, you can pour water on it all day long, water runs right off. It's not going to do anything for it. Also, with the salting of the soil, obviously it's going to reduce your microbe and fungi population. Mycorrhizal fungi, a lot of people don't know this, but they get in the roots. and they actually soak in more water and they soak in more nutrients. It's a symbiotic fungus that works off of the plant's roots but gives the plant back nutrients and water. So you don't want to knock that out of your soil. That's something you actually want in your soil. Plus, nitrogen fertilizer costs money, and I'm cheap. You can ask my wife. I don't pay money for anything I don't have to. And I don't think you all do either. So definitely a good thing. Compost. What's the difference between nitrogen fertilizer and compost? Well, nitrogen fertilizer doesn't contain all these other things. Compost has nitrogen, carbon, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, iron, manganese, magnesium, ad infinitum. I could go on forever with everything that's in compost. I bet if you took one little cup to a testing facility, they would test it. You'd have lists and lists of things that are in there. But it makes the soil loose and friable also. The soil soaks water in like a sponge and it holds it. Something I don't talk about a little bit too much in this presentation, but compost is also humus. It's hard to define what humus is, but humus is degraded organic matter that's going to actually soak water in. It's going to let the soil be looser. The roots get into the soil easier, water gets held in the soil easier, much better soil with compost. Plus it adds microbes and fungus to the soil, gives them a good environment to thrive, gives them the nutrients too. You have to feed your soil to feed your plants. Plus, as I mentioned, compost is usually either free or low cost. And compost is not fertilizer, it's not organic fertilizer, it's a holistic soil treatment. I like to talk about history. I should be a history teacher, but I'm not. I don't know why I like to talk about history, but I do. And this is probably eye candy, or at least for me it's eye candy. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of compost so you understand. This has been going on for a while. The first really, and there's some Sanskrit texts and things like that. The Bible talks about using animal manures as a fertilizer in the fields. But the first real instructions on compost came to us from Rome. Marcus Cato the Elder. Between 234 and 149 BC, he wrote about composting and many other agricultural topics in his book, The Agricultura. And it's one of the oldest surviving Latin texts. Of all the texts to survive, all the things from Rome that came out, this survives. So, this is important. You've got to remember this. In fact, he said of his compost instructions that they should be written in gold in every farmhouse. He felt it was that important, and it is that important. So he talks, and I won't read all this, but he talks a little bit about how to make compost. He's talking about going and getting it from the highways. He's talking about going to your neighbor's house, cutting down his ferns if he'll let you. You don't want to do that nowadays. You can get shot. So, but cutting down ferns, collecting the manure from the oxen that pulled the carts through Rome. I mean, this is some interesting stuff right here. So we all hear the story about the Native Americans in Plymouth Rock and the Pilgrims and the first Thanksgiving and how they taught the colonists how to grow food. Well, we know the story about burying the fish with the corn. That's pretty common knowledge. You don't know the story about burying the fish with the corn? No. So the Native Americans, when they were planting the corn, they'd plant the corn and they would either, I can't remember if it's in the hole or next to it, they would drop a fish and they'd bury the fish with the corn. As the fish rotted and made fertilizer with the corn, came up and grew better. But, so almost everyone, sorry, I don't want to point you out. Almost everyone knows about, everyone knows now about the fish compost with the Native Americans. But they don't also know the Native Americans also taught the colonists how to do compost with muck, wood ash, and the fish. The fish providing most of the nitrogen, the wood ash providing the carbon, and muck also pretty much the same thing. George Washington, first president. He built what he called a dung repository. And it was actually just the first composter, first device for composting that I can find anywhere at least. And he built this because he was reading some books. He was a well-read man like Thomas Jefferson, most of the founding fathers were. He read some books and he kept lamenting. He said, unless some practice prevails, my fields will be growing worse every year until the crops will not defray the expense of the culture of them. And of course, he was growing tobacco, so he grew this tobacco up, chopped it down, he sent all of his nutrients over to England, and they smoked them. So he had to find a way to replenish that. So his way to replenish that was his livestock. He needed to get all the aged manure. He needed to get all that manure and age it in his composter. But as he went on, time went on, he realized he couldn't get enough manure, so he'd start collecting things. He'd have his slaves, the people around the house would sweep up everything, and they'd bring it to this little thing. And this is actually a recreation at Mount Vernon of what his original plans for his composter or dung repository was actually made. So that's a little bit about the history. I thought it was interesting. I had to share it. Sorry. So why compost? Compost, we talked about the fertilizer part of it. It's not really fertilizer. It's good soil treatment, but it also reduces landfill space. I know when we compost at home, all of that kitchen waste and various things that can be composted. Sometimes it's cardboard, newspaper. I don't really like to compost, but we do sometimes. You can get all of that into a shredded form, and it breaks down, and you actually reduce your waste that goes into a landfill. It results in a safe and effective soil amendment, which we talked about. It's full of plant elements and nutrients. A lot of people wrote me this year because obviously I put my podcast out. They think I know something, so they wrote me. Why are my tomatoes rotting at the ends? Tomatoes rot at the ends. It's blossom end rot is what it's called. People think it's some kind of disease, some kind of fungus. It's not. It's a calcium deficiency in your plants. Your plants can't take up enough calcium from the soil. The reason they can't take up enough calcium from the soil is two reasons. Not enough water or not enough calcium. If there's enough water, there's not enough calcium. If there's not enough calcium, you put some compost down, you'll help that. Compost utilizes materials that are otherwise useless. We're going to throw them away. We're going to throw our kitchen scraps away. You see all the people in these suburban neighborhoods, and I used to be part of a suburban neighborhood, and they have all these bags of leaves and bags of yard clippings. That's crazy. I drive down the road in my pickup truck looking for them. I pick them up. So, makes you more self-sufficient. That's what we talk about on my show every day, is how to be more self-sufficient, how to garden more self-sufficiently. And there's nothing more self-sufficient than compost. You're making your own soil treatment. It saves you money in mulch and fertilizer costs, as I talked about. I don't buy fertilizer anymore. I haven't bought fertilizer in years. And it's completely organic. So it means what you're eating is actually good for you. The plants you grow in it, a lot of people don't talk about this with organic too much, but the plants you grow in organic actually have more nutrients. Our agricultural revolution methodology right now is depleting the soil to the point where when you eat something made from that system, you're no longer getting the nutrients you need. You're no longer getting the nutrients that were there. Nutrients that were there in the 1950s are no longer there anymore. So they've tested this, they've measured this.